Hey, what's up everyone? Raging Golden Eagle here, having way too much fun as always. Especially today because I can point and laugh and say I told you so. We're gonna be revisiting our good old buddies Cloudflare. Let's see what's going on with them now. Well, it seems they are now terminating service to Sci-Hub, which, as the article I'll be linking in the description box below says, are basically the Pirate Bay of science. It's pretty much a place where you can see academic journals and research papers without having to pay like $30. So pretty much this site allows plebs like us to fact-check other sites and people that use these studies as sources, and make sure they're not taking stuff out of context without having to spend a fortune doing this time and time again. And those of you who've seen my previous video on Cloudflare, you're going to be able to figure out where this is going early. But first, a little bit of information on what exactly is going on right now. On February 3rd, the Twitter account for Sci-Hub tweeted a screenshot of an alleged email from Cloudflare, the content delivery network provider for Sci-Hub, which acts as an intermediary between the user and the website host, informing Sci-Hub that its service would be terminated in 24 hours. At the time of writing, the main Sci-Hub domain is inaccessible on the web, but the mirror sites mentioned in the screenshot email from Cloudflare are still active. So Cloudflare is cutting off their service. I thought they didn't do that. They were pretty adamant about it. So let's see why. Cloudflare's termination of service is due to a court injunction against Sci-Hub. That order was handed down by a federal judge in November, keep that in mind. The date's important. When the American Chemical Society, another academic publisher, won $4.8 million in damages against Sci-Hub. The decision also included an injunction requiring search engines and internet service providers to block Sci-Hub, a digital blockade unusual for the US. Gotta love the precedent we're setting with this one, huh? Remember a few years ago when everyone here in the US was pointing and laughing at China? We were ridiculing the so-called Great Firewall of China on a pretty much daily basis. Now they want to use that as an instruction manual for what to do in the US. Either way, final little bit of information here before we get to the important bits. In these circumstances, we look at a court's order and make a determination whether or not we think it applies to us, the Cloudflare spokesperson told me over the phone. Cloudflare was not specifically named in the order against Sci-Hub initially, but when the judge denied the Computer and Communications Industry Association's amicus brief, asking that search engine blocking be removed from the order, the decision named Cloudflare's specific services. And there we go, they now have a legally binding court order to police and censor the internet. Now for those of you with long memories, you may remember I did a video way back I think in October of last year, a month before this court order came down apparently, in which I went over an article pointing out that Cloudflare's just spur-of-the-moment decision to kick the Daily Stormer off the internet, as they put it, is starting to have some unintended consequences for them in all of their legal cases. They did this in August, and the fact that this court order came down in November, it took all of 3 months for this to start biting them in the ass. The original video is, of course, linked in the description box below. I suggest you go watch that for some extra context. But for now, let's go back to the very source, all the way back to August when they started this whole thing. In this other article, they do a pretty damn good job of explaining exactly why this is such a big deal. For years on end, Cloudflare has been asked to remove terrorist propaganda, pirate sites, and other possibly unacceptable content. Each time, Cloudflare replied that it doesn't take action without a court order, no exceptions. And yeah, I noticed it too, guys. The very observant among you noticed that they already specified they don't take actions without a court order, no exceptions. The story I just went into includes a court order. So we're comparing apples to oranges here. Or are we? I'll admit that's a very legitimate concern. Just keep that in the back of your head for a little bit. We're going to be addressing it shortly. But for now, let's move on. Even if it were able to, Cloudflare does not monitor, evaluate, judge, or store content appearing on a third-party website, the company wrote just a few weeks ago in its white paper on intermediary liability. Intermediary liability, they are already talking about court cases here, but we're not there yet. Just keep it in the back of your head. We'll get there, I promise. We are the plumbers of the internet. We make the pipes work, but it's not right for us to inspect what is or isn't going through the pipes, Cloudflare CEO Matthew Prince himself said not too long ago. This, of course, was before he just decided on a whim to remove the Daily Stormer. If companies like ours or ISPs start censoring, there would be an uproar. It would lead us down a path of internet censors and controls akin to a country like China, he added. And yes, he is absolutely correct. As the court order from a few months after this was posted proves, we are already well down that path. And yet, I do not see much of an uproar. But either way, I promised, so here we go. Let's see how this ties into the court cases. First off, I did kind of get into it in my previous video, again, link in the description, and that one went a little bit more into the details about how companies took Cloudflare's decision to remove the Daily Stormer and used that as evidence for all the excuses that they're saying in court are bullshit. But now, even this article that predates the one that I went over in my previous video, they have some pretty good little nuggets of information in here too. This strong position was also one of the reasons why Cloudflare was dragged into various copyright infringement court cases. In these cases, the company repeatedly stressed that removing a site from Cloudflare's service would not make infringing content disappear. And this is true. But you gotta remember, this was the main excuse they were using for why they couldn't, or rather shouldn't, be forced to remove a website. As they say in the very next line, pirate sites would just require a simple DNS reconfiguration to continue their operation after all. And now a direct quote from Cloudflare. There are no measures of any kind that Cloudflare could take to prevent this alleged infringement because the termination of Cloudflare's CDN services would have no impact on the existence and ability of these allegedly infringing websites to continue to operate. So there you go. So keep in mind, this was the excuse that Cloudflare used in all of their court cases for why they shouldn't be required to take down a website. And now look at it from the plaintiff's point of view. They don't really care if the site can just come up again later. They want to make it as difficult as possible for them to operate. And part of that includes forcing Cloudflare to take the website down. And back in August of last year, when they decided to virtue signal by taking down the Daily Stormer, they demonstrated to everybody that everything they've been saying has been complete bullshit, and from the plaintiff's perspective, all they want is for Cloudflare to take down the websites. Like, they don't care if the content is still going to exist on the internet. Well, they do care. But they know Cloudflare can't do anything about that. Well, they just want to make it as hard for them to operate as possible, so they need to force Cloudflare to remove the site. And after what they pulled with the Daily Stormer, Cloudflare's usual excuse for why they don't pull content is now null and void. Why did they just arbitrarily take down the Daily Stormer without any court order even, if it didn't make the content disappear? If this is something a simple DNS reconfiguration could fix? If the website continues to operate anyway? Why did Cloudflare decide to take it down? Yeah, I'm gonna stop now. I think that's enough. It's painfully obvious to everyone that Cloudflare not only dug their own grave when they decided to go virtue signal, but this right here may very well be the start to the US version of the Great Firewall of China. Pretty damn important if you ask me. So I'm actually pretty damn annoyed that more people aren't talking about this. We now have a court order from a federal judge requiring search engines and ISPs to block traffic to a website. This is a big deal. And while I'm not foolish enough to believe that this wouldn't have happened sooner or later, Cloudflare's virtue signaling last year definitely sped up this process. So all that's left to say now is warm up those VPNs. That's all I gotta say, guys. Thanks for listening.